A little girl in a pageant dress smiles for the camera on Christmas night. Hours later, she is found in the basement of her own home. A ransom note waits on the staircase. The phone call is frantic. The scene is wrong. The JonBenét Ramsey Mystery, Who Killed the 6-Year-Old Beauty Queen? The title feels like a headline. The reality is a shattered family, a broken investigation, and a question that refuses to die. Beneath the glitter of trophies and ribbons, the story splits in two. One path whispers intruder, a garrote fashioned from a paintbrush, a window, an unknown male DNA profile that does not match her parents or her brother. The other path points inward, a ransom note written on paper from inside the house, a dollar amount that echoes a Christmas bonus, a discovery in the basement that should have been impossible to miss. Both paths cannot be true, yet both have their believers. This is not a cold tale from a dusty file. It is Christmas 1996 in Boulder, Colorado. A warm house, a party, laughter, lights, a 911 call before dawn, a search that ends where no one imagined it would. And then the twist that rewires the nation's sympathy into suspicion. The grieving family becomes the focus of the investigation. The JonBenét Ramsey Mystery, Who Killed the 6-Year-Old Beauty Queen? Say it again. Let it echo. Because what follows is a story of evidence that contradicts itself, of a crime scene that was never truly sealed, of neighbors who heard a scream, and of friends who crowded a house that should have been empty. It is the fight between two theories, two agencies, two Americas watching the same footage and arriving at different truths. Do not blink. The ransom note is 2.5 pages long. The garrote is precise and cruel. The basement is a maze, and somewhere between the staircase and the wine cellar, the line between tragedy and theater blurs. Stay here. The next minutes will walk you through a Christmas that never ended, a letter that read like a script, and a discovery that changed everything. The JonBenét Ramsey Mystery, Who Killed the 6-Year-Old Beauty Queen? Don't look away, because the truth behind this case will make you question what you think a home can hide. The JonBenét Ramsey Mystery, Who Killed the 6-Year-Old Beauty Queen? Before the tragedy froze her name in headlines, JonBenét Patricia Ramsey was a child who loved Christmas lights, who played with dolls, and who carried the charm of innocence wrapped in sequins and ribbons. She was born on August 6, 1990, in Atlanta, Georgia, the second child of John and Patsy Ramsey. Her father was a successful businessman, president of Access Graphics, a computer services company later acquired by Lockheed Martin. Her mother, Patsy, was herself a former Miss West Virginia, a woman who poured her energy into her daughter's beauty pageant career, shaping JonBenét's image as a child star in the small but competitive world of kiddie pageants. The family moved to Boulder, Colorado, where they settled in a sprawling house on 15th Street, worth more than $1 million at the time. From the outside, their lives looked like a Christmas card, a wealthy home, smiling children, a mother who glowed with Southern charm, and a father who had climbed the ladder of American business. To friends and neighbors, they were the picture of success. JonBenét's pageant crowns gleamed in photos that appeared on television, an image that later became the symbol of both her promise and the unease people felt at a child groomed for the stage. JonBenét's older brother Burke was 9 at the time of her death. Quiet and reserved, he spent most of his time playing computer games. To the outside world, the Ramseys looked like a privileged family enjoying the fruits of success. Yet the images of sequins and spotlight masked a different story. A household where pressure, performance, and appearances often took precedence over private truths. On Christmas Day, 1996, the family attended a party at the home of Fleet and Priscilla White, close friends of the Ramseys. Guests remember Patsy lively and glowing, JonBenét smiling in her holiday dress. No one at the party could have imagined what would follow when the family returned home that night. The next morning, instead of wrapping paper and toys, the house on 15th Street held a ransom note, a frantic call, and a discovery that turned the story of Christmas into one of America's darkest mysteries. But beneath the warm glow of Christmas lights, something unsettling had been quietly building. Neighbors later recalled hearing a scream in the night. Friends whispered about the intensity with which Patsy pursued JonBenét's pageant career. Reporters pointed to a tension between a mother reliving her own crown through her child and a father so focused on business that emotional distance crept in. From the moment the news broke, JonBenét's story was framed by images. The smiling child in sequins, the wealthy Colorado home, the ransom note sprawled across 3 pages. These images became more powerful than facts, setting the stage for suspicion, scandal, and endless debate. The JonBenét Ramsey Mystery. Who killed the 6-year-old beauty queen? Behind the trophies and holiday parties, a secret was waiting to be uncovered. What happened that night inside the Ramsey home was more than a crime. It was the collision of innocence, ambition, and a justice system unprepared for the storm that was about to break. As with so many tragedies, the warning signs came quietly, fragments that only made sense after everything had collapsed. Friends of the Ramseys described a home that sparkled with decorations, but also with tension. Patsy Ramsey, glamorous and exacting, placed enormous emphasis on presentation. To her, the Christmas tree had to be perfect, the house immaculate, the children polished for photos. JonBenét was both daughter and crown jewel, dressed in sequins, makeup applied with a hand that had once worn its own pageant sash. Behind the smiles lay exhaustion. Patsy had been a cancer survivor, carrying both the scars of illness and the pressure of maintaining appearances. For John, business was constant. His company had just surpassed $1 billion in sales, and the weight of success left him absent even when present. Neighbors later remembered a certain distance in the marriage, as though 2 people lived parallel lives under the same roof. JonBenét herself was adored, yet even in her young life, cracks of discomfort showed. Teachers recalled her arriving tired at school after late-night rehearsals. Photographers whispered that the pageants blurred the line between childlike charm and adult performance. To the outside world, she was a star. To those closer, she was a 6-year-old pressed into a role she could never truly understand. Then there was Burke. Older by 3 years, often overshadowed by his sister's pageant spotlight. He was intelligent, but prone to sudden bursts of frustration. A bowl of pineapple on the kitchen counter would later become a symbol of that tension. An ordinary snack turned into extraordinary evidence. The cracks widened on the night of Christmas 1996. The family returned from the Whites' party. Neighbors reported hearing a scream. Others saw a faint light still glowing near midnight. The house that should have been quiet was not entirely still. Hours later, Patsy would say she went downstairs and found the ransom note, but investigators noted the oddity. Her handwriting samples bore similarities to the letter. She denied it, but suspicion was planted. The ransom note itself was its own fracture in reality. 2.5 pages, written on paper from inside the house, demanding exactly $118,000, nearly identical to John's Christmas bonus. Too specific to be random, too careless to be professional. The author claimed to be part of a foreign faction, a phrase so clumsy it read like theater. And then a line lifted almost word for word from Dirty Harry. It was as if the note could not decide whether to be terrifying or absurd. Inside the basement, more contradictions waited. A garrote made from a paintbrush and nylon cord, duct tape on the mouth. A body carried upstairs by a father who had been told not to touch it. Evidence preserved and destroyed in the same breath. The police, inexperienced with homicides, allowed friends to gather in the house, contaminating everything. Officers admitted years later they had lost control of the scene, but the deepest crack was not in the evidence. It was in the narrative itself. Was this the work of a sadistic intruder who slipped in through a broken basement window, left a ransom note, and vanished into the night? Or was it the work of a family member staging a kidnapping to cover a crime born of rage, accident, or panic? JonBenét's story, once one of pageant dresses and Christmas lights, was now split into 2 versions of reality. Each piece of evidence could point either way. Each interview raised more doubt than certainty, and each contradiction pulled the case further into a labyrinth no one could escape. The JonBenét Ramsey Mystery. Who killed the 6-year-old beauty queen? The question lingered not because there were no clues, but because there were too many, each one a crack in the glass, each one reflecting a different truth. Christmas night had ended quietly in Boulder. Outside, snow covered the lawns of wealthy homes. While inside the Ramsey house, ribbons and lights still glowed, but the silence was deceptive. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, innocence collapsed. Patsy Ramsey would later say she woke up before 6, heading down the back staircase still in her holiday clothes from the night before. There she found the ransom note laid out on the steps. She screamed, waking the house. At 5:52 a.m., her call to 911 crackled with panic. She told the dispatcher her daughter was gone, that a note demanded money, that someone had taken JonBenét. Yet even in her frantic tone, investigators later claimed they heard something else. An odd detachment, a script-like rhythm that fueled suspicion. The note itself was bizarre. 2.5 handwritten pages, demanding $118,000, a number eerily close to John Ramsey's recent bonus. Written with a pen and paper from the family home, the writer claimed to represent a foreign faction that respected John's business but not his country. The lines veered between threatening and cinematic. One lifted nearly word for word from a Clint Eastwood movie. For some, the letter was evidence of a stranger staging a kidnapping. For others, it was proof of a clumsy cover-up. As the hours passed, the contradictions mounted. No call came from kidnappers. Friends and neighbors were allowed inside the house, contaminating the scene. The police treated the case as a kidnapping, not a homicide. Officers moved between rooms, unaware they were walking over evidence. Cups of coffee were set on kitchen counters. The living room filled with people, even as a child was missing. 0 p.m., Detective Linda Arndt asked John Ramsey to search the house again. With his friend Fleet White, he headed to the basement. Minutes later, John emerged carrying JonBenét's body in his arms. She had been left in a small, windowless room known as the wine cellar. Her mouth was sealed with duct tape. Her wrists were bound. Around her neck, a garrote had been tightened with the handle of a broken paintbrush. John tore the tape from her lips, lifted her into the light, and laid her on the floor upstairs. In that moment, crucial evidence was destroyed. The crime scene, already compromised, became irretrievably broken. The autopsy deepened the mystery. The official cause of death, asphyxia by strangulation associated with cranial trauma. An 8.5-inch fracture split her skull, the result of a violent blow. She had been strangled with a handmade garrote, a weapon rare and sadistic. The brush handle used to twist the cord came from Patsy's own art supplies, though the missing piece of the brush was never found. There were other details too disturbing to ignore. Evidence of injury in the genital area, though no semen was detected. The coroner concluded she had been assaulted with an object, possibly the broken paintbrush. Her pubic area appeared to have been wiped clean, as if someone attempted to erase traces of the assault. Undigested pineapple was found in her stomach, a clue that contradicted her parents' statement that she had gone straight to bed after the party. On her hand, a small red heart was drawn in the ink. Around her wrist, a gold bracelet inscribed with her name and the date of Christmas Day. The contradictions deepened the sense of unreality. A garrote built with knowledge of knots, yet used in a chaotic crime scene. A ransom note suggesting patience and planning, yet found in the middle of the house. A body left in a basement room, yet discovered by the father rather than police. Every piece of evidence pointed both inward and outward at once. And then there was a scream. Neighbors reported hearing it shortly after midnight. Some believed it was JonBenét's last cry. Others argued it never happened, that memory blurred under media pressure. The truth, like so many parts of this case, remained unstable. By the evening of December 26th, the child beauty queen, who had spent her last day singing carols and smiling for family friends, was gone. What remained was a mystery layered with contradictions. A ransom note that read like theater, a weapon fashioned from household items, a crime scene spoiled by chaos, and a family whose grief quickly became shadowed by suspicion. The tragedy was no longer just the loss of a 6-year-old. It was the collapse of trust between the family and the police, between evidence and interpretation, between America's ideal of childhood innocence and the brutal reality hidden inside one house in Boulder. What followed was not a clear march toward justice, but a collapse into conflict. The Boulder Police Department had little experience with homicides. From the beginning, they treated the house as a kidnapping scene, not a murder site. By the time JonBenét's body was carried upstairs, the most crucial evidence had already been trampled, touched, or moved. Officers later admitted their mistakes. One chief would even confess years later, "We lost control of the scene on day one." The Ramseys, once seen as grieving parents, were soon under suspicion. Detectives pointed to Patsy's possible handwriting on the ransom note, to the peculiar demand of $118,000 to the pineapple in JonBenét's stomach. Theories formed quickly. Perhaps a mother snapping under pressure? Perhaps an accident covered by desperate parents? John's actions, discovering the body, removing the duct tape, carrying her upstairs, were framed as staging rather than shock. What had begun as tragedy now turned into accusation. But inside the district attorney's office, the view was different. Prosecutors doubted the strength of the case against the family. They saw too many contradictions. They pointed instead to the possibility of an intruder, a broken basement window, an unfamiliar footprint, unidentified DNA on the child's clothing. They warned that without solid proof, a trial would collapse. This split created two investigations running at once. Police hunted evidence against the parents. The DA's team chased shadows of an outsider. Instead of uniting, the two sides leaked information to the press, fueling a circus that soon engulfed the family and the case itself. Talk shows dissected the ransom note on air. Tabloids painted Patsy as a jealous mother who lived through her daughter's pageant crown. Others cast John as the powerful businessman hiding a dark secret. The Ramseys could not escape the cameras. In 1998, a grand jury was convened. For more than a year, it reviewed evidence. In secret, the jurors voted to indict both John and Patsy, not for murder, but for child abuse resulting in death and accessory to a crime. It was an extraordinary moment, citizens declaring that the parents bore some responsibility. Yet when the decision reached District Attorney Alex Hunter, he refused to sign. He announced there was not enough evidence to move forward. The indictment remained sealed for years. Only in 2013 did the public learn that jurors had wanted charges, but the DA had stopped them. The result was paralysis. Neither innocence nor guilt was proven. Suspicion hardened into stalemate. The fallout spread beyond courtrooms. Neighbors withdrew. The Ramseys appeared in interviews, insisting on their innocence, pleading for the case to be solved. Patsy spoke often of her faith, saying she believed God knew the truth. John tried to defend their family against what he called character assassination. Yet every word was picked apart. Analysts judged their body language, their tone of voice, even the choice of clothes. To many, they were no longer parents mourning a child. They were suspects performing for cameras. And still no trial came. No charges stuck. The unknown male DNA profile, discovered years later on JonBenét's clothing, complicated the narrative even further. In 2008, a new district attorney publicly exonerated the Ramseys, issuing an apology and declaring that the DNA pointed to an intruder. But scientists argued the evidence was too weak, that such a tiny trace could have come from manufacturing or incidental contact. Once again, certainty dissolved into debate. The case became a mirror, reflecting the fractures of American justice. A police department blamed for incompetence. A prosecutor's office blamed for cowardice. A public split between those who believed in family guilt and those who saw the hand of a predator. Each anniversary of JonBenét's death brought fresh documentaries, fresh theories, and fresh wounds for those who knew her. By the time Patsy Ramsey died of cancer in 2006, she had lived a decade under suspicion. She was buried next to JonBenet in Georgia. John and Burke lived on, carrying the weight of unresolved accusation. The tragedy had long since moved from the basement of a house in Boulder into the permanent archive of American culture, a story of justice undone not only by crime, but by everything that followed it. And in the silence left behind, one truth became clear. The courtroom never delivered a verdict, but the court of public opinion never stopped judging. The house in Boulder has long since changed owners. The Christmas lights that once framed its windows are gone. Yet for millions, that address is frozen in time, an image of wealth, tragedy, and unanswered questions. The murder of JonBenét Ramsey is not just an unsolved case. It is a wound that never closed, a story retold so many times it became myth, yet never reached resolution. What lingers is not only the brutality of the crime, but the collapse of trust it revealed. Trust in the ability of police to protect evidence. trust in the courts to pursue truth without fear, trust in images of family, innocence, and home, every element fractured. A little girl's smile turned into a symbol of suspicion. A ransom note became a riddle. A grieving family was cast as suspects, and a nation learned how quickly empathy can turn into accusation. Over the decades, investigators have tried to rebuild what was lost. New technology brought the promise of DNA testing. Genetic genealogy offered hope of unmasking the unknown male whose profile was detected on JonBenét's clothing. Yet even here, contradictions persist. The sample is mixed, fragile, too thin to anchor certainty. Scientists argue over whether it can ever yield a name. Each announcement of progress fades into silence. Each headline of a breakthrough becomes another reminder that the case is still cold. For John Ramsey, the fight continues. He has spoken publicly about his frustration, about watching technology solve other cold cases while his daughter's remains unsolved. He believes one day, science will give an answer. Burke, now an adult, rarely speaks in public. His childhood forever overshadowed by speculation. Patsy rests in the same cemetery as JonBenét. Her life bookended by beauty contests and suspicion. And for the world, the case remains a mirror of unease. Some see proof of a violent intruder. Others remain convinced the truth lies within the family. Most agree on only one thing, that the system failed. A crime scene unprotected, evidence compromised, investigators divided, prosecutors hesitant, journalists eager, viewers enthralled. Out of that storm, clarity never emerged. In the end, the story of JonBenét Ramsey is not only about who killed a 6-year-old beauty queen, it is about how a single night exposed the fragility of institutions meant to protect us. It is about how media transformed a child into an icon, how suspicion replaced compassion, how truth slipped between contradictions. Who killed JonBenét Ramsey? An intruder moving silently through the dark? A family hiding a secret too heavy to face? Or a mystery built on so many errors that it can never truly be solved? Perhaps the answer lies waiting in a lab, in a strand of DNA not yet read. Perhaps it will never be known. But one truth cannot be denied. Behind the headlines, behind the theories, was a child whose life ended too soon, a child who never saw another Christmas morning. The closing thought is not about guilt or innocence. It is about memory. The memory of JonBenét as a daughter, a sister, a performer on small stages, a little girl who loved lights and laughter. That memory is what remains when the evidence falls apart, when theories clash, when the case drifts further into legend. In your heart, who is JonBenét Ramsey? A victim of a predator in the night? A casualty of family secrets? Or a symbol of a justice system that failed? The mystery endures. The debate endures. But the child at the center, the 6-year-old beauty queen whose story still haunts the world, should never be forgotten.